This time I'd like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Plaquemines Parish Council as the sole governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District for July the 14th, 2022 at 3:01 p.m. to order. Machine is open for roll call. Let the record reflect that all members are present. Mr. Sanders is here to represent the administration. This time I'd like to ask you to rise for the prayer that will be led by Mr. Blank and the Pledge of Allegiance to follow.
We take this moment to acknowledge Almighty God and thank Him for our bountiful blessings, especially for the parish's natural resources. We pray for all those who have lost their lives from COVID-19. We pray that the number of COVID cases do not reach pandemic levels again and the world moves forward to a healthier and brighter future. We pray that entering this hurricane season, everyone will get prepared and the season will be a peaceful one. We also pray that we'll be spared from all harm and destruction. We pray for the people of the Ukraine and that you provide a path of peace and to stop the senseless killings. And we pray that this government body, comprised of both council and administration, will always serve our parish with honesty, humility, and equality to all, and for the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do that which is right. Amen.
I pledge
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for attending today. We'll move on to the regular agenda.
Executive session, there are no matters. Agenda item 3, status report by the Executive Port Director.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. I am Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District. Follows is my Executive Director's report for the reporting period of 24 June to 13 July. During this time frame, the major significant event was a cooperative endeavor agreement reached by the port and Port Ship Services, the business that is located on Parcel B3. Port Ship Services is an active business located on Parcel B3 that services the many vessels that lay up in the many anchorages that are located in Plaquemines Port jurisdiction. The owners of the business have previously agreed to relocate down the river to a location the port owns, freeing up Parcel B3, allowing it to become a part of the Venture Global campus. As everyone knows who has been following the B3 saga, this has taken an excruciating length of time getting the new location permitted, mainly due to the new position by the United States Army Corps of Engineers not allowing any traffic to run directly over the federal levee, but now must be bridged. This item is being introduced today and will be voted upon at the next port meeting. I received a call from Colonel Steve Murphy 2 days ago with an answer to a prayer. As it appeared from Mark Wingate from the United States Army Corps of Engineers, the recently announced $700+ million for the NOV back levy was going to be released, demanding a 25% match. I told Mark Wingate at the time they might as well not give us any money because coming up with 25% on $750 million would be virtually impossible. I immediately contacted Senator Vitter, who went to work on it. Colonel Murphy informed me that the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Public Works backed off this stance. The port once again participated in the shareholder meeting regarding the container terminal project, and Chris Fetters and his team are up next to provide an update. The project is moving forward and is gaining momentum. At this time, I will ask Chris to come forward with his update. Chris?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. Chris Fetters with Louisiana 23 Development. I've got a number of updates, and due to the stakeholder meeting that occurred this week, I've asked a number of the critical shareholders to stick around for an extra day and provide some of their individual comments to the board and make themselves available to questions if they deem. It's been a busy few weeks for us, but I'll kind of recap Tuesday's meeting, as well as some of the requests that have been made from us by the port board. On last week, we did receive a written request from the port board through Mr. Garrett to provide permit information for the projects that we've been participating in Plaquemines Parish. We have two that I have provided back as far as the permit numbers. So they are public documents, so they can be searched and downloaded at any time and tracked for their progress. For the record, on the Mainline extension, the permit number is P2022-0537. And then for the terminal, it's P2022-0261. And so that way, if any board members or anyone in the public would like to be able to get online through Office of Coastal Management or the joint permit application tracking process, you're welcome to see any of the documents that we upload throughout that evaluation. From there, I'll take you into more of what we did on Tuesday. We changed things up a little bit. Typically, when we do these stakeholder meetings, it's a workshop where we bring in most of our key vendors, contractors, and consultants that can provide updates on critical things like the rail and the port. This time we changed it up and we invited a broad scope of folks to the meeting that wanted to participate and attend to be able to hear firsthand from our group what was going on. We were able to bring in our typical cast of characters with the Port Authority, my group, as well as APM, Volkert, NNP, which is Nigel Nixon Partners. WSP came in virtually, and then we had representation from Sustainability Partners, and then our selected contractor for the terminal, the team of Massman, Weeks, and Jacobs. Andalusian was also present with Mr. Tyndall. He's going to speak here in just a moment. We were very grateful to have some members from PABI, SLEC, Jefferson Parish, as well as Commissioner Laparole and Captain Bob. So we were very well attended with this meeting and allowed a lot of informational sharing and back and forth and an open Q&A. I'll give you kind of the wave tops of it so that we can get in and get out pretty quick. We discussed and provided, Sandy and I did, a background of how we got to where we are today. From the original studies that were constructed from the Port Board, or at the time the Parish Council in the late 2010 or late 2000s, 2008, 2009, and how the commercial study evolved from there, really kind of backing up and giving those folks who did not have the opportunity to understand where we came from a moment to consider that information. Then we had the membership from SLEC come in and really give us some details about our Plaquemines First initiative. It's a very critical initiative for us, given the nature of the parish. Sandy has made this a priority for us in doing it. And so Cody Blanchard and some other folks from SLEC were in attendance for us. It's not your typical vendor management program where you just sign your name up on a list and then you hope to get a call back on any of the project work. Instead, what these representatives are doing is they're creating a mentorship program. We respect and acknowledge the fact that there are just so many small businesses in Plaquemines Parish that either through revenue or insurance or staff probably will not be able to successfully bid on these multi-million, $100 million projects. So SLEC is putting together a program. They are hiring a local representative. We've asked Sandy for some space at the port office, and we're working through that in order to put someone local so that there is a person that these businesses and representative people can go talk to and try to get work through this mentorship program. They can ask their questions and actually have some true one-on-one personal time. We're extremely excited about it. As we've talked to with our vendors, especially our primes and those of Massman, we didn't put a percentage of local use. Our expectation is for them to maximize local business to the fullest extent possible. So that way that every person that's here has the ability to gain access to it. This SLEC program, if they are not successful in the first round, the mentorship engages and they identify the areas where the local business did not meet the criteria for entry. And then SLEC, through our process, aids them in upgrading their status, either by revenue or insurance or teaming agreements, so that these local small businesses can then grow as they need to. We're going to be here for a long time. This is estimated to be a 10 to 12-year project, and so we need to make sure that this is well established in the beginning. From there, we spent some time, and I invited each one of my critical vendors to come up and introduce themselves and get a little bit of their history. I'll save you guys the time and give you the short version of it. We've got really 6 primary groups that we rely upon, each with a very storied history and are very well respected in their markets. Volkert, as you know, is our prime consultant as far as both for the terminal and the rail. Volkert was established in 1925. They now have 1,200 employees across, I believe it's 10 different offices, 50 offices, excuse me, and they are consistently in the ENR, which is the Engineering News Report, record for being a top 100 firm for design and oversight. So they're a very well qualified firm. Nigel Nixon and Partners, and Mr. Nixon is here himself, and he's going to speak in just a moment. They were established in 1994, and they are specialized in planning and oversight, as you know, and they've participated in major projects at LA Long Beach, Houston, Kingston, Jamaica, New York, New Jersey, Oman, Taiwan, just to name a few. So again, we're very thankful to have Nigel and his team here. They're very well qualified. WSP, who spoke a little bit at the last meeting, established in 1959. Again, a very well-storied firm. They're now over 55,000 employees in 10 regions around the world. I don't even know how many offices because they're so large. They are consistently, again, in the top 5 on ENR. I believe that they were number 1 in one of the design firm categories in 2021. Massman Construction and Weeks Marine are both well over 100 years old. They have done numerous projects throughout this region on the river, and as far as heavy construction goes, they're one of the safest operators in this area. In fact, they're doing a tremendous amount of work currently on the VG property, and we're very thankful. Steve Hayes is here today. He's going to introduce himself and a little bit about the Massman team. And then they're supported by Jacobs Engineering. And Jacobs, again, top 5 year in and year out from an engineering design firm. Those are the critical folks that are here to help us deliver both the terminal and the rail over time to give us that highest quality and safest operation. Then, as we started to conclude the meeting, I asked these critical partners, and they're going to do something similar today, just to take a couple of minutes and introduce themselves and what their opinion is on our project as far as it as a global impact and or as a state or regional impact. Nixon is here, as I said, as well as Steve Tyndall. Brian Harold with APM was in attendance at the meeting, but he was unable to attend today. He has committed to be here at the next meeting and speak to it. And Brian, as you all know, is very well respected in this market as a terminal operator. And is very, very high on this project. And really, his big words for us were that if Louisiana doesn't have a new terminal, then Louisiana will get left out as far as container terminals go. That's really the takeaway that I had from Brian's comments at our meeting on Tuesday. So we're in the catbird seat, as they say, driving this project forward, and APM is still very, very high on everything that we're doing. We then asked both Commissioner Laparole and Captain Bopp to provide some comments. I do believe Captain Bopp's going to try to make an attendance at the next meeting as well, and I will save his words for himself. But the commissioner, as she always is, was very gracious and very supportive, very well aware of the work that's being done by Sandy and myself to bring this terminal online. And so the State Department of Transportation stands in support with the governor's office. From there, we really went over the commercial need for the project. There's always comments and questions about why are we doing this. We are completely blessed, and we're extremely thankful not only to have APM at the table as a global operator, but also our friends at Andalusian. They have provided us contracts and commercial viability that fully fund this first phase of the development. Pedro Santos, the founder, was here at the last meeting, and he really gave the business plan. I won't rehash that again, but we were able to open that up and allow the folks at APM as well as Nigel's group to really expand on what that means to have a customer at this point in time that has given us so much financial security. So at this point in time, I'll take a break and I'll let Sam Matheny come up. Sam's going to provide a brief overview of where we are on the rail project, and then I'll allow the folks that are most associated with the terminal to step in and provide their updates before we wrap. Sam?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'll try to keep this presentation today brief because there's others to speak after me. But just generally our current update and status on the Mainline rail. For our design phase 2 and task 1, which is our environmental and cultural surveys, we're approximately 75% complete with that field work. And then that data collected from those studies is currently being incorporated into our final environmental constraints analysis, which is part of our documents that have to go to the agencies for review. For our surveying, we previously reported, of course, we completed the aerial survey. The data from that survey has now been processed, and we've created our base topographic CAD files and our aerial mosaic imagery for our design efforts. For the utility investigations, we're currently getting our contractor work plan developed and preparing to mobilize his personnel to the field to do the next level of the investigation for existing utilities. They will probably be in the field week after next. And then for our route analysis, we're at the point we've prepared revision 3 to the track alignment drawings based on the field data that we've collected for both alignments, option A and B. And at this point, we've got sufficient data that we've determined that option A is the preferred alignment. And so that is the option that we have taken forward. We're continuing to work on the route analysis report, and as with the environmental constraints report, that data will be incorporated into our agency permit applications. As far as the permit go, we actually made our initial briefing presentation to the United States Surface Transportation Board yesterday. That briefing went well. That was mainly an introduction of a few questions from the board. Now we have to, that sort of starts our clock with them, and we've got, written documents and letters that we have to get into them. As part of that, we've selected a firm, hopefully that the STB will approve, to perform the third-party oversight for the STB's Office of Environmental Analysis. That's one of their requirements, so that's kind of a critical piece. They have firms that are pre-approved to do that, so we've selected one of their pre-approved firms that also has a local presence here. We've kicked off our rail capacity study with the New Orleans Gulf Coast Railroad and evaluating their existing track system, and that is an important document that also has to go with the applications to the STB, because what that study tells us is what is the capacity of the rail system with what we add to it in addition to what they already move on their rail. And then we've set up an initial briefing on the project with LADOTD for next week. For the geotechnical investigation, we have completed and submitted our joint permit application. That's been initially reviewed by the state. We've paid our application fee for that, and so that's now under review by the agencies. And then on our right-of-way acquisition, we've engaged the services of a title agent to help us develop our research and right-of-way easement documents, which will be a very critical step as well when dealing with the other large property owners that we'll have to negotiate easements with. Kinder Morgan being one of those, we have met with them and their representatives. They have been cooperative. We're looking at the two different alternatives of how to get through their property, and we're in discussions with them about those options. For the design package itself, we're now at revision 4 of our alignment drawings, and that revision basically pulls in a couple of options that we've developed to pass under the Venture Global Pipe Bridge along Highway 23. And I've got those drawings here just to give you a general overview of what that will look like. We have brought hard copies if the board members would like to have a hard copy. I know sometimes it's hard to see them on the presentation. But essentially, with Venture Global's permit drawings, we've determined that we can pass safely under their structure. Our required height clearance of top of rail to bottom of their structure per railroad regulations is 24.5 feet, and we have 28 feet. So we've got a little room to spare there. Typically, we design to a minimum of 26 feet to allow for future tamping of the rail as a maintenance operation. So having 28 feet actually gives us a couple of extra feet as a cushion there. So this first option I'm showing is actually the one we would prefer, although we need to get with Venture Global. They might not prefer this one, but we want to keep the track away from the highway for safety reasons. So this alignment keeps the track away from the highway, still has clearance to go under Venture Global's pipe bridge, but it does require the alteration of their access road, which is the line shown in blue, was originally went straight to the highway. Under this option, we would have to curve it, and then we would have to build them a road, which is shown in the orange. And just due to safety concerns, again, for the highway, we would have to put in a deceleration lane where any vehicles that were trying to get to their access road, if they were stopped by the train passing, they would get off the highway and have a place to wait for the train to traverse the access road. What this option kind of looks like in cross-section view, what I generally just discussed, we have that 28 foot of clearance. We show two sets of tracks in this drawing. At the current time, of course, we're only going to construct one set of tracks. We will intend to build our subgrade for an expansion to a second main line if that becomes needed in the future. One of the key things we need to coordinate with Venture Global in this scenario is their columns for their pipe bridge and their column foundations. We need to coordinate our foundations against their foundations because they'll be right beside each other. And then, of course, for safety, we'll have to put in a crash wall, which goes on either side of the track. The second option, similar to the first, although it does not modify Venture Global's access road. We come off the highway at the same place. They will come off the highway the same place they plan to. This scenario, though, puts our track closer to the highway, which will require some extra safety precautions, guardrails for the highway. We would still have to have the deceleration ramp for their vehicles, and then the grade on their access road would have to increase slightly because they would have to get further from the highway across the track before they started to increase their grade. And the cross-section of that alternative is shown here. Essentially what that does is we still have to coordinate foundation, but only one foundation, and put in a crash wall against the pipe bridge column on one side, and then we'll have to put in guardrail on the highway side. From a schedule perspective, for the next 60 to 90 days, by the end of the month, we hope to have our route analysis report completed. And by the 10th of August, our final environmental constraints report. And then our schedule at the moment is to have the rail capacity study finished about the middle of September. Those are the three key documents that we need to advance our permits to the Surface Transportation Board. And that concludes my presentation today. If any of the board members have any questions.
Any questions from the board? I have a couple of questions. The permits that you've already submitted, the permits are in whose name?
The permit is in LA23's name for the geotechnical investigation.
Any other permits that have been applied for?
Not as yet. The next one will
And
be,
they'll all be in LA 23's name for the rail?
Yes.
And on the environmental constraints report, will that give you an indication whether you have to do an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement?
Yes, it will, and the STB are the ones who will decide that, not us. I mean, our data we've collected so far, when we briefed them yesterday, we recommended just an environmental assessment, not an EIS. They did not openly object to that. They didn't approve it, of course, because they want to see some of the data. So once we get these reports to them and they have a chance to evaluate the reports, then they will direct us as to whether we do an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement.
And have any right-of-ways been acquired in any form or fashion?
No, not other than the right-of-way that the port already owns.
And they signed a document to put that up for the rail yet?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
You say, I asked if there were any right-of-ways had been acquired in any way, and you said other than what the port already owns.
Yeah. No, we have not acquired any right-of-way other than what the port currently owns. We're in discussions with the other owners, and we probably won't actually acquire that. We will lease it as an easement.
And that takes care of my questions for the rail anyway. Any other questions at this time? Thank you for your report.
Thank you, sir.
So moving on past the Mainline rail update, I'm going to ask Mr. Tyndall to come up now. He does have a flight afterwards, so as soon as he's finished, we're going to let him go ahead and go. Steve's going to kind of provide some insight in the position right now of where Andalusian and himself are. Steve?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My name is Steve Tyndall. I'm Vice President of Ports and Marketing for Andalusian Energy. Before joining Andalusian last March, I enjoyed a 30-plus year career in the public ports sector. And in the course of my experience, I've witnessed a diverse range of port projects, big and small, easy and challenging, and I've seen the outcome of all of the ones I was associated with. In December 2017, I first became aware of Andalusian's intention to ship compressed natural gas aboard conventional container ships. And at the time, I was Senior Director of Marketing and Business Development for the Port of Brownsville in Brownsville, Texas. Soon after a first meeting with Andalusian founder Pedro Santos, I pointed out that they were missing an opportunity. And the opportunity was to consider shipping commercial third-party containers on board their vessels. It took some time, but they eventually agreed with my suggestion, and the outcome will be that the operating revenue that's generated by this new volume of cargo will significantly reduce their cost, Andalusian's cost, and it will also greatly increase the number of containers that they will be responsible for moving. Andalusian went so far as to sign a lease with the Port of Brownsville. They began an extensive rounds of due diligence, and things were moving in the direction that they would launch the service from the Port of Brownsville. Then things changed. COVID-19 hit. And it had a profound impact on the port's business and the way we did business. And we were forced to change the way we did things in order to survive. But we did. In fact, the port flourished, and we didn't miss a beat. But it was because the port commission stayed the course, and port staff executed the plan that was given to them. Andalusian had to adjust too, and unfortunately, it meant that I lost the business to the Port of Plaquemines. And they chose the Port of Plaquemines because they have a ready supply of natural gas here, and they can participate in what is the largest port development in the United States, Louisiana's Gateway Terminal. So It was difficult for me to accept losing the project, but fortunately for me, previously to that announcement, I had already told my commission that I was planning to retire, and I did that in February of 2021. 3 weeks later, after my very long retirement, Pedro Santos convinced me to go to work for him, and so that's how I became acquainted with the company. But like all big projects, schedules change, priorities change, budgets change, and as you know, it can be frustrating at times. But the one thing that can't change is staying focused on the goal. And that's where the Port of Plaquemines and Andalusian are the same. Together we know that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. If a decision to change will not achieve the desired outcome, then we must rethink the motivation. These large projects are complex and very complicated. They're influenced by all manner of things you can control and things you can't. And I'll give you an example. When I was with Brownsville, we had 3 liquefaction LNG facilities considering the port for their projects there. Together, those projects represented a $32 billion plus investment. They suffered the same effects that we did with COVID-19. If you recall, at that period of time, the oil market was crashing, just the opposite of what's happening today. The financial landscape was very challenging. And so those things conspired to prevent one of the companies to move forward. So one of the 3 dropped out. But because the other 2 stayed the course, they made the necessary adjustments to do what was necessary to keep their projects alive. It looks like the largest of the 3 will make FID, final investment decision, in the next few months. The other one looks pretty good too. So the real winners here, of course, are going to be the residents of Cameron County in Brownsville, Texas. Things for Andalusian have improved over time too, and are continuing to get better. That provides some certainty for the successful development of Louisiana's Gateway Terminal, because we're going to be the first BCO to occupy the facility. And please keep in mind that just since the 4th quarter of last year, the primary beneficial cargo owner, which is us, has committed to the project. A world-class terminal operator has made its intentions known regarding a terminal services agreement. A rail extension has evolved. A project EPC has been selected to manage and construct and execute the project, and an aggressive schedule is set to deliver Phase 1A by Q4 of 2024, and that's where we come in. There are always bumps along the way, but I commend you, all of you, for never losing sight of the goal. It's very easy to fall victim to project fatigue, if you want to call it that, but you, as a commission, persevered and you stayed on course. And to your credit, you have a port director in place that is known and respected within the port industry, and a top-notch team assembled to deliver the project. I can tell you that because I have to work with them, and they're good people. And in the end, Sandy Sanders is the guy that keeps things going in that direction. He keeps everybody in line, and he's the glue that keeps it together. The real winners of this project will be the constituents of Plaquemines Parish. They'll benefit with new jobs, potentially lower taxes, because the companies that locate here to support the project will be paying taxes too. Those things may translate into enhanced social services. But more importantly, I think they will result in jobs. So I'm asking you to please keep the team together. Please, let's get this to the finish line together. And please, let's do these things to the benefit of Plaquemines Parish together. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Tyndall, at this point, have you executed any agreements for financial support?
The only way I can answer your question, sir, is to be a little vague. We expect to make FID in December of this year. We are attempting to get all of our documents in line so that we can begin the flow of money through FID, which will again happen in December. So we are firmly committed.
You're committed, but no financial arrangements have been made to guarantee the project at this point.
No, sir. But we do have a 15-year offtake agreement, which will be used to leverage the financing. So we're very confident that the project's going forward, or we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
In January of this year, as we were starting to really gain our momentum, we had invited Mr. Nigel Nixon to provide kind of his introduction to himself, or to the board, and his project experience. We're now, a full 6 months past that process. And I've asked Nigel to kind of come up and give his assessment of where it is. He's been very instrumental in advancing what our plan was, and also in overseeing the procurement process that landed us this team of Massman and Weeks. So Nigel, would you please come up?
Mr. Chairman, Board, good afternoon, and hello again. Nice to be back and nice to see you all. If you remember, when I last was here, I said that we were brought in by LA23 as their strategic advisors. Why? I'm not local, I'm not from Louisiana, but what NNP have done over many years is looked at opportunities, port opportunities, that come from all sorts, all countries that like to get the finance and like to happen. So we're kind of used to this scenario of a greenfield site, particularly developing into a full-blown project that is commercially sound. I think I talked you through last time the process that we did in helping LA23 from commercial study through to the master planning, through enabling the permitting process, which enabled the scope to be delivered for the EPC and to try and win the EPC, a procurement strategy to fulfill the requirements of the BCO, who you've just met, which is a tall order because the challenges for that BCO to create a terminal in short time isn't easy. There are lots of obstacles, there are lots of parameters to consider. And I think it's fair to say that one of the reasons probably why I'm here and my team is because this is not the first time we've done it. I think I should also say that because of our relationship with funders and institutions who invest in these type of projects, we like to look at these projects very neutrally, in meaning we like to see it as if it was our money. So we took the start of this project, we looked at it to say, does this really work? Does this have legs? Because I can tell you, over the last, I think it was 19 projects that we looked at globally. This is from Indonesia, Europe, South America, India. I would say we never went past go because we didn't see it made sense. The 20th one we looked at did make sense, and it had legs. And I'm very pleased to say it was your project here, Plaquemines. It was that feeling we had about the deliverability and its commerciality that drove us to give every support we can to LA23, which is really why I'm here. Despite the fact we've helped manage the process, remember our role is not as engineers. That's been well covered by Volkerk, more than capable of delivering the engineering, and the EPC's engineers. Our role is very much to try and use our experience and our expertise globally. There's one thing that we did advise, maybe not how to do it necessarily, but certainly to tell how not to do it, because we wanted this naturally to be a great success. As Steve has just said, what we found over years and our experience with these projects, Steve mentioned the word bumpy rides. He's absolutely right. There are a lot of hurdles that come in the way. during the process because there's so many variables, as you can imagine, on a project of this complexity. But what I think I've been very impressed with is the way that Sandy has actually dealt with each of these hurdles and persevered with them and the drawbacks and the frustrations, but managed to mount them. Not everyone can do that. And that was, to me, quite special and quite unique in many respects. I also think that was probably helped by the encouragement of the board. And I have to say to you all, I think you've done a remarkable job in keeping this project going. Because as I said, we've seen so many that haven't. I mean, the other thing I'd raise before I finish is to say that a lot of the projects we've been involved in has actually been of great advantage to the local parishioners, the local people where the project entails. And whilst people will say that the locals will benefit by employment, all the usual things, the added value to the process, what's missing and what people probably don't say is when these projects from zero to fulfillment, there's much more that the local parishioners will gain. And one thing I would look back and say, you must be incredibly proud, I would have thought, that you were actually supporting and part of a major gateway into the United States of America. Now, I'm an international person. I see international gateways around the world. To be part of the international gateway in the United States is really quite something. And I really hope you all do so well out of this. And I want to see it all go, and I'm sure you do too. And I'm very privileged myself to be part of it. Okay.
Are there any questions for Mr. Nigel?
Sorry for a new
Any questions?
Personal note, what part of England are you from?
Oh, yeah. I'm from Oxfordshire. Do you know it?
Yeah, my mom's from Birmingham.
Birmingham. Well, that's not far away. You mean Birmingham, England, not Alabama, I take it, yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, or make this comment. You said we should be very proud. I believe we are very proud sitting here today with the success of Venture Global being the largest capitalized under construction project in the world to date for 2022. And the way we've gotten there is because we had a partner that was very transparent and open and upward with us. Now, would you agree that transparency is very important to make these successes?
Yes.
You would agree with that? Yes. And over the years, have you seen projects fail because of lack of transparency?
Not solely because of. No, it often is the straw that breaks the camel's back in many respects, if you follow me. But I think at the end of the day, when it doesn't succeed because it doesn't make financial sense. Sadly, a lot of these projects are driven by money. And I think you will, if it's a public authority project, it's slightly different. My experience is largely based on the private sector. And if you're looking for private money, it's driven by rates of return, it's based on cost certainty of CapEx, understanding your OPEX, all these modeling in finance. Transparency is entirely up to the privilege of the promoters. Some of it obviously has to be confidential because the relationships you're creating with the various BCOs and operators is very sensitive commercially. So you can't be open about every aspect of it. One wouldn't expect you to. But I think on general, if it fails because of lack of transparency, I think that's only one very small part, to be frank. It's my experience anyway.
And in your working relationship with APMT, have y'all got any issues that y'all have resolved on design?
Sorry, say again?
In your workings with AMP, with the MERS people?
Yes.
Or America, what's the name of it that I'm trying to grab to?
APM. AMPT, yes.
Yeah, that's what I said in the beginning.
Yeah, all right, okay.
So, have y'all had any issues that y'all had to resolve on design work between APMT and a consultant that they might have brought in?
No.
None?
No.
Okay.
No. I think if you're suggesting why do they bring in WSP as part of the process, and maybe that's what your question is, I mean, that is quite normal because the APMT have their own bespoke form of operation, which is very specific to them. Our project, or our aim, was to do the best for LA23, who could be talking to a number of operators because you need flexibility. At the end of the day, you want the best deal for the project. So whilst our role was very much to look at what's best for the developer, once you've then defined who the operator is going to be, and you're happy with him commercially, he'll have his own way of doing things, which will be very specific to his type of operation. Each operator has a different modus operandi. And it so happens that APMT use a particular group of consultants that understand their specific mode of operation. And it's quite normal for them to then use that consultant to deliver that particular peculiarity or bespokeness, if you like, of that operator within the process.
Well, the confusion comes in for me is that I thought that the public announcement and the press releases that we had engaged APMT was long before you showed up.
Oh, I think that's true, yes. I'm not saying I brought in APMT.
No, I'm not saying you did, but what you're saying just now was that, you represent LA 23, and so you were looking at it from their perspective, and if we had already engaged APMT, I'm not sure where we went for the checkoff.
Yeah, well, I think if you've got to remember, when you start planning the process, you're planning it for the best of your client, don't you? You want it to be the most successful. The fact that he has got an operator that he's been talking to, yes, of course we consider that operator, but we have to think, until that's all tied up and it's contracted, you have to assume that there may well be a necessity to have another operator, because this is a big project. You could have an operator on part one, phase one. You might then go on to phase two, which might be the same operator, might be another operator, depending upon the shipping that comes in. So it's sensible, is it not, to ensure that when you plan it, that you take flexibility for any type of operator, and that was our approach.
And since this container terminal is going to be privately funded and built, that's something that should be in the private sector.
That's what I would expect, yes. The public sector, when they're public sector, public authorities are doing their ports, they have a slightly different viewpoint, because they basically are looking very much long-term, and often they'll do their developments without any specific business coming through it. So what happens in those situations, they tend to have to be very much more flexible, but that tends to add to cost, because flexibility equals cost. If you're bespoke to what you need, you have less cost, which makes it more business viable.
And since your relationship is with LA 23, this group comes here as a courtesy to the board just to inform us what the private sector is doing, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, nice to see you, and thank you very much.
Cheerio.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. We really appreciate that. Lastly, I typically have Luke LeBach come up and provide an update, but given what we did in this stakeholder meeting, we began the process of introducing the lead for the Massman Weeks joint venture. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask Steve Hayes to come up and introduce himself real briefly, about 5 minutes, to just kind of give his background in the area so that you can see who's going to start taking over this project and have that kind of point of contact as we move forward. Steve?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Steve Hayes. I work with Massman Construction, and we're going to be the sponsoring partner of the Massman Weeks joint venture that we're in negotiations to contract with LA 23. I've been with Massman my entire career, more than 40 years. And I spent over half my career in South Louisiana. I'm currently a resident of Baton Rouge. Been that way for most of the past since the last 15 years. I've worked on many projects in the area. We built the Wrigley's Bridge years ago to get from New Orleans, East New Orleans to the Slidell area. Worked in a little small part in building the 4 main river piers for the Greater New Orleans Bridge back in the early 80s. I've worked on the UEP Long Widening Bridge in the New Orleans area, and on 4 major dock structures, one, the biggest being for Nucor Steel, on the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Marathon built a dock that we built with Marathon most recently on the Mississippi River. Weeks has also over 100-year company like ourselves. They have a presence in South Louisiana. They're the biggest dredging contractor down here on the south end of the Mississippi River. They have large marine equipment like Massman, Jointly, we feel like we have the best, biggest marine fleet of equipment there is on the Mississippi River. We are working with Jacobs as the designer for the job, and Jacobs has been recognized as being the premier container terminal designer, both internationally and in America. We are currently working on our contracts with LA 23 and with subcontractors. We plan on working with Eustis Engineering to do borings, Brown and Root Industrial Service to do survey work. That'd be the initial work, be the only physical thing that people will see is hopefully a week or two, within 1 or 2 weeks after getting the contract, we'll have survey work being done on site, topographical survey work, hydrographical survey work on the river, and then also bring in users to do some soil borings to take soil samples. We also will start getting involved with the permitting process on the Corps of Engineer 408 permit, and we hope to meet with the Corps soon to get engaged with that process to go over their needs and understand what it is it's going to take to get this permit done as soon as possible. We are part of the joint venture Weeks Massman that has 3 large contracts on the VG's Venture Global site. The 3 contracts, the first contract is the big surge wall being constructed around the entire perimeter of the site with the pipe piles on an angle and the sheet pile walls you can see off Highway 23 right now. We also have work going on in building the marine offloading structure on the river. You see the red boom sticking up in the air near there. And then we soon will start on the marine terminal facility that will be the dock, this piping structure that Sam showed earlier on the railroad's presentation, and the marine facilities to berth 3 ships at that site. And that is part of the same team that's involved with LA 23 on this job. We're getting a lot of experience putting our team together, and we have a lot of opportunity to take this team and transition it over to the LA 23 project when it would begin. That's about all I have. I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, are there any questions? So when do you anticipate on executing your contract?
We hope to have a contract in another week or 2.
And it'll be with LA 23 as their,
Progressive design builder.
and it'll be a contract that'll go in phases?
Well, the contract right now is the pre-construction phase that deals with the period of designing the structure, working with LA 23 and their partners on coming up with what the best structure is going to look like. There's 3 milestones within this structure: a 10% design, a 30% design, and a 60% design. This is in a 6-month period. 10% is based on the current core application. Won't be much change there. The 30% is where you come. We have some deliverables, some drawings. We'll provide an estimate of cost at that time of what that looks like. And at that point is when we start reaching out with vendors for pricing and trying to narrow down the options so that we pick out the best option, the most optimal and most cost efficient and time efficient option. And then at the end of the 6-month period, we'd have the 60% design complete, which is normally enough to get the permit approved. And we can provide LA 23 with a cost certain price for the project.
And how do you fit in with Nigel Nixon, who just made a presentation about his role in here?
Well, I don't fit in with them at all. We were a separate entity to this group. We're not associated with them, but they provided the basis of design for this project, that in our RFP we answered and we made our proposal. We addressed the things that they brought up in the design basis of design. We follow that to get started on the project. We're following that for what permit, what the 10% drawings look like. That was in that package, and what the expectations are of the design builder.
And how do you interact with Volker? with their engineering design team?
Well, we'll answer to them. They'll be the conduit of information from LA 23 to us, and I'll be working with Volkert on a day-to-day basis and communicating what we're doing and what, they're playing the role, kind of in my mind, as the construction manager on our part, and they are the link between LA 23, their vendors, their suppliers, and what we need to do to design the bridge or the terminal. So we'll be in constant contact with them.
So y'all are in the stage now of already billing for your work?
Excuse me?
Are y'all in the stage now of already billing for your work?
No. No, we're not.
Any other questions? Mr. Blank? Let me give you the-
Certainly. So I was able to view the coastal use permit for what looks like the container terminal online as I was sitting here. So has that design reached 60% already, if that's been applied for?
No, it's not. It's only a 10% design right now.
Okay, all right. And there's a piece of land that the container terminal overlays on the permit application that's owned by another party besides the larger parcel. What's going to happen with that piece of land?
I don't know the answer to that. You'd have to ask Chris and his team.
Okay, thank you.
Complete, Blank?
Yeah, yield.
Let me ask you this. How big of a footprint are you designing a project for?
I don't have that top of my head. It's roughly the larger parcel that Mr. Blanket talked about.
100 acres?
I don't know the number. I don't.
Is it just on the river side of the highway?
Yes,
And that's the first phase of the project?
yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate all three of them stepping up and providing their insight. Last thing that we discussed in the meeting on Tuesday, which I know has been a topic of conversation here, has been the funding sources for things, how this is getting paid for in the different projects. You guys are well aware of the contract between the Port Authority and Sustainability Partners to deliver the rail. Beyond that $50 million commitment that they've made for Mainline, they have extended their commitment into the larger project up to a $1 billion placement of capital. It doesn't mean that the next phases of the project have to include the Port Authority in any way. SP has found their way into the area, and they're very comfortable with the way things look. Most likely, they will look at things like the Peters Road program on this side of it as far as the rail piece goes, as well as looking at our cranes and other utility-based equipment that would exist on the terminal. These things can get to be very expensive, and the financial process that SP affords us is a lower utilization, lower cost on the delivered capital. So we're very excited about them. I've made that aware to the board historically. In addition, as a part of our original contract agreement, we've also brought on a group called CIG Capital. They've given us a letter of commitment for deployment of up to $850 million of debt service as we need it. Again, this is primarily what Steve was referring to when we talk about the guaranteed max price. When we go to the construction phase, we're probably looking at a CapEx somewhere in the $400 to $500 million range. So that's going to require a significant debt partner in order to be able to bring this on the right way. Those were the funding sources when we were provided an agreement for this exclusivity with the Port Board in 2019. As you guys are aware, in 2020, there were some decisions made on moving forward on the land or not moving forward on the land that we're discussing. When the Port Board did not move forward on the land by their own accord, Sandy and I had a conversation in order for us to be able to continue the track of the project. And so we set out in order to be able to identify a funding source. This funding source is very, very different than the two I just mentioned. Land money is different, more difficult money in order to be able to come by for a process like this. First of all, they've got to be willing to carry the capital for about 3 years before it's a revenue generator. So we found one that did that. Second of all, and most importantly, is if and when at the time that the port decides that they would like to step in and purchase the property, that this investor would be willing to part with that property. And so that narrows that group down even more. Earlier this past week, I sent a notification through Sandy's office to the board, as per our contract, that we have gone into an agreement with a group called MHI Capital. We plan on having one of their representatives here at the next board meeting to discuss the background of MHI. MHI has provided us enough capital to finish this land procurement process. They've authorized me to execute this within the next 90 days. We originally had our scheduled closing for parcel 6 set for tomorrow. The attorneys, due to scheduling conflict, they have moved it to Tuesday. So that way we can go ahead and wrap up the parcel 6 commitment. And I know this is very important for all phases. In addition to that, they've gone ahead and provided us with working capital, not only to recover the funds that we've laid out to date for the work of Mr. Nixon and others to get us to where we are, but it also secures enough finances that we can carry the Massman Weeks team all the way through their 180-day process. So that soft cost money that we originally talked about has been fully secured, and it's in a private endeavor. So this is no obligation to the Port Board. This is no obligation to the parish or anything of that matter. Lastly, what I would tell you, and I think this is very important for Plaquemines Parish, when this situation presented itself, when it was originally going to be the port that purchased the property, obviously then the property would come off the tax rolls, right, because it's a public body hosting the land. When we stepped into it, we realized that what we could have as far as a severe impact in doing this by being a private body. We worked our finances with this group especially, so that we will not pursue any form of an ITEP for the region. We do not look for a tax incentive program in order to be able to go here. We believe that this parish is rich in its natural resources, and that what the value of the properties are right now benefit the project larger. So in order to be a good partner with the area, we will not be pursuing an ITEP for the lands that we purchase. So happy to answer any other questions about the financing and what it is, to the extent I can on a private matter. And then again, I will have a representative from MHI here at the next meeting.
So let me ask you this, you talk about the soft cost investment that's already been laid out. How much is that so far to date?
It's nearly $8 million beyond that of what's been on the private rail, on the mainline rail extension, sir.
Beyond the 8 million?
It's $8 million beyond what we've paid on, what has been paid for on the mainline rail.
So the 6 million that we've already approved, plus another 8?
Yes, sir.
And who is that 8 million owed to?
Me.
To you?
Yes, sir.
And you said no ITEP program.
Yes, sir.
Is that considered interstate commerce, so you don't pay taxes on it?
So those are different pieces of it, Mr. Koknovich, right, on the interstate commerce exemption versus the land ad valorem offset is what we're talking about. The interstate commerce we would have to address with the operator and with the BCOs themselves, but happy to have that discussion. At this point in time, I'm willing to commit to the ITEP part of it. I can't really speak for, the vendors that sit on the property. I hope you can appreciate that.
And is someone here from Sustainability Partners? Because I have a few more questions for them and for Mr. Sanders.
We have our project rep and Mr. Jake Beebe. He's here. I don't know what he can and can't answer. He's not the legal, representation for it.
I'm not a lawyer either. I just want to ask him some questions.
It's up to Mr. Beebe.
Mr. Black? Let me give you the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fetters, you mentioned something, and this is a sticking point for me, and I just want to clarify what you said. You said parcel 6 closing date is set for Tuesday, the 19th.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I will provide notification to the Port Board when it's completed.
All right, is there the parcel 6, does it include the piece of property that is currently in litigation, or is that being separated out?
It's being separated, so it is being separated out, but it is being held in an escrow so that if in the event that the current owners of parcel 6 are deemed to be the actual owners of that land, then those proceeds are already set into escrow. If for some reason the other two parties that are in contest with the parcel 6 ownership are awarded, the escrow will be returned to us and we would have to enter negotiations with them.
Okay. I'm sure you will, but would you please advise this board as soon as parcel 6 is closed on?
Yes, sir.
And what about the property, LSU experimental property that?
So the properties, as you're all aware from the map, the parcel 6 ownership, assuming that the current ownership of the main body parcel 6 owns the Batcher land, let's just take that for an assumption for a moment, makes a bit of a U on its side. So you have the Woodlands Plantation and the LSU properties within those. Those two properties are really within the bounds of what we would call the latter end of phase 2 for the development, or possibly the early part of phase 3. So at this time, for the phase 1 to be viable and proceed forward with the contract that we have with Massman Weeks, it's set within the boundaries of the uncontested portion of parcel 6. So we would have to pursue, some form of an arrangement with both the ownership of Woodlands as well as the parish with the LSU property as we get out of phase 1 and start into heading into phase 2. Any other questions for me?
For Sustainability Partners. Hi, thank you for coming up. I've looked at the dashboard that y'all updated. I made a request that we get further information, and you updated it. And looking at the dashboard, I see pay applications number 5 and number 4. And on the pay application to date, out of the second tranche of money, it's been about $1.2 million paid to date, or spent to date. And my question to you, Sandy, is on right-of-way acquisitions, where we have no right-of-way acquisitions purchased at the time, but you signed off on these 2 invoices. On number 4, it says 50% completed right-of-way acquisition, $70,000. And another line, number 5, railway alignment progress, $112,500 on pay application number 5. And on pay application number 4, another $140,000, 50% completed right-of-way acquisition. And on number 5, again, 50% rail alignment, another $112,500, which comes to probably around $500,000 on right-of-way acquisition, where it says 50% complete. What was that money expended on? Sandy? Sandy, you signed off on I have the pay applications here where you sent the document to Chambrel, and it says, regarding the last payers application, Chambrel, I approve and look forward to the next step on pay application 4. And on number 5, it says, Chambrel, I have looked over the pay application. It looks good on my end, approved for me and back to you for your blessing, Sandy. So you approved off this $500,000, and my question to you is, what does that $500,000 represent for the right-of-way acquisition that is indicated on the pay applications? 50% on both of them, which comes to about $500,000 without any right-of-way acquisitions being purchased to date. What does that represent?
Time spent on doing what they got to do to get the.
And what is that? What is that time spent that you're talking about?
That was the appraisals and whatever that they had to do to get, to start the right-of-way.
So we've done appraisals on right-of-way acquisition properties in the rail right-of-way?
It's their,
No, it's you're approving
right,
this.
it's to pay for their approach to get these right-of-ways.
What is that, Sandy? That's what I'm asking you, and maybe you can tell me.
Sure. I mean, there are many properties that have to be analyzed along the way, along the rail line, along whatever they're doing in their design phase. Those properties take a long time to analyze, and they may engage in lawyers or other people and have meetings with them. And it's all the work that builds up towards that.
But do you know what the specific work is? Because I've been seeing these pay applications for the first $3.5 million where this was billed.
Yes.
And I see, so go ahead.
I believe on the dashboard, or as part of one of those pay applications, they also provided a large spreadsheet with many different addresses. So that has to be acquired and compiled and also analyzed.
That came off of the assessor's website that you can do in 10 minutes.
Okay.
I got that.
Okay.
I'm looking for the backup and justification of the $500,000 expended under the right-of-way acquisition on the pay applications where it says 50% complete.
Yes. I mean, I'm looking at the descriptions on the pay app as well as verifying the work that's done with the engineering and design team.
Okay, so you verified and you reviewed the work. What was the work?
Well, I don't know the exact amount of right-of-ways or properties that are included in this entire project.
I'm not asking about the entire project. I'm talking about the $500,000 to date that has been billed and has been paid and authorized by the director for 50% of the right-of-way acquisition according to the pay applications that are submitted for his approval.
Right. And to get that information, there's many professionals that are engaged.
Okay, who are they? You can go ahead and elaborate.
The design team, such as, LA23 and their associates, the engineers, the lawyers, the title lawyers, all the people that are involved in right-of-way acquisition.
So you really don't know.
I just listed 4 or 5.
You listed generalities. I'm asking you for what the work product was. You got a list up there that was taken off of the website for the assessor's office, and, I see that on a daily basis. That's what you put in the work product of the dashboard as the deliverables. I'm going to let this pass because, Sandy, if you don't know what you signed off on, I feel sorry for that. And if you,
No, these were for abstracts, appraisals, and everything that they have to do when they're pursuing to go after the right-of-ways. And I told you that.
no, abstracts and appraisals were in the first 3.2 million. So we did them again?
It would be ongoing.
I'm going to let this rest because, I'm not making any progress here. I can tell you that from looking at the dashboard, $500,000 for what's on that dashboard, you could do in about 10 minutes, searching the assessor's website, and I'll leave it rest at that.
Mr. Bartholomew.
Who's, Mr. Bartholomew? Sorry.
Yeah, but my question wasn't him, my question was on the other issues right before. That's okay, I'll just take.
Sir?
I had a question before.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess that is the end of your presentation on the rail in the terminal.
I have a question.
Mr. Blank?
Mr. Fetters.
Yes, sir.
It sounds promising that you've been able to find some potential financing for the project. What is concerning for me is it looks like SP could potentially be the largest potential funder of the project. Commissioner Newberry and I were in a meeting talking about the rail, and I was repeatedly asking for railroad overpasses at key intersections like Woodland Highway and and Walker Road. If the rail is going to go down that way, we can't have society held up by trains, right? If we don't have a rail overpass at Woodland Highway, there's going to be 2 halves to Bell Chase, the new half and the old half, right? And one of the representatives from SP, I believe it was Chris Ferrari, mentioned, that when these projects are built, the public's not necessarily at the top of the list. Why we spend extra few $1 billion, tens of millions of dollars to build these rail overpasses. And I'm really concerned that if SP does in fact fund this, that there will be no funding to mitigate for some of those community impacts. And I just want some sort of reassurance that at the very least, there's going to be rail overpasses at these key intersections.
So first of all, I obviously wasn't a part of the conversation, so I can respond to what.
You were there?
Was I? It was one of, okay. I didn't know, I thought it was recently. I apologize, Mr. Blank. So we actually took your concerns right now as one of our critical pieces of information because right now we're focused on the mainline rail. Okay, Peters Road and getting up there is a separate topic. It's a separate project. So on the mainline rail, we know that we have really, once we get south of Ironton, right, you start to get into some larger industrial tracks, and then you start to head into the main campus. And as you approach the main campus, we have a choice. And that's what Sam had brought up before. We have option A, which carries us down the east side of LA 23, which would prevent a crossing. Okay? Now, what it does is it engages us into Venture Global. And that's something Sandy and I have been working on to try to get with their engineering team because, that's a very sensitive, safety-minded issue with the rail crossing.
Back to the rail bridges at Woodland Highway and Walker Road, though.
But those would be part of the Peters Road program. That's my point, is that these are separate and distinct programs right now. So we have funded and are designing the Mainline extension. As we go into the Peters Road program, I believe that in some of the preliminary concepts that were already done, would that allow them to get their FONSI from the FRA, it did include a flyover of LA 23 in order to make a safe curvature to go down Walker Road. But my point to you is this. Safety is going to be paramount as you do any of these projects, okay? The safety of the residents, the safety of the individuals. When you deal with railroads and cars, and I'm not a full railroad guy, we can bring in the guys from NOGC, they don't like being close to cars at any point possible. Crossings obviously make them nervous. Crossing, the residential drives and the smaller drives that they currently have to deal with are significant. Having to cross a 4-lane road is major, okay? It would be my anticipation, Mr. Blink, that a flyover at Walker Road would be absolutely critical in order to be able to make this function as far as the Peters Road program, because having that intersection and, as you say, dividing it into North Bellchase and the south isn't good for anyone, is what I can tell you. But we're not on that project right now.
So, look, it's our job to limit exposure to the public.
Yes.
And the thing is, I'm particularly concerned about the Woodland Highway crossing right now, because if Peters Road seems like it's going to be a second phase, but the 406 crossing is going to be in play right away when you start moving rail traffic. We're talking about a lot of trains.
Yes, sir.
There's already existing traffic there. Who knows what the coal terminal is going to start moving once they have rail in their backyard. We need to be open and honest about that, right?
Yeah.
It's a
I'm
possibility
agreeing
that
with you.
they could potentially be an uptick in traffic there. So I'm particularly concerned, when I say I want to have public meetings talking about how this is going to impact people, it's not a Southern Plaquemines Parish thing. I mean, we'll go to town, we'll be all right. But it's the folks that live in Bellchase.
Sure.
They're going to have to deal with these major inconveniences to their life. And we all know that there's a lot going on in Bellchase right now, right? There's a new bridge. There's probably going to be a sediment diversion under construction. It's a hellhole right now to be there in a car. And this is going to make it significantly worse. So what I'm getting at, though, is I just, at this point in time, I don't see any sort of protection for the public to have any sort of mitigation for the increase in train traffic here. There's been no commitment for a rail overpass for 406 traffic where it meets Bellchase Highway.
All right, so first of all, there's been a safety analysis done. And again, some of this I'm going to have to defer to the railroad as an operational safety restriction, okay? I mean, there's design and construction, and then there's the actual operation of the railroad, as you can appreciate. It is our understanding that regardless of what happens on the main line, that the amount of traffic that would increase, and look, all traffic increase is going to be impactful. I don't want to discount that at all. But the size of trains is limited until Peters Road comes online. And it's my understanding those trains can't be any more than 4,000 feet long. Those are still very long trains, but they're not full unit trains. It's also my understanding that one of those 4,000-foot trains, not just because of the crossing you're talking about at 406, but also with dealing with Gouldsboro Yard, getting into Gretna, and going all the way down into Westwego, those are limitations as well. So about one of those 4,000-foot trains can run per day. That's all that can happen. The speed of that operation, the timing of that operation is something that has to be worked out with the railroad. Second thing I would say is that this project, and when I say this project, not just the terminal, but the entire port complex, to your point, coal, or when Noble Oil Terminals comes online and they want to utilize rail, will not be sustainable with the current alignment. Peters Road has to come online very quickly. So if there is a concern, it is our objective to make that concern in as narrow a window as possible, and including the consideration of the bridge that you're talking about, the diversion that you're talking about. These are complexities into an already complex situation. So I would anticipate that if there is impact, it is short-term impact as far as mitigating it. We don't want this to be a prolonged purpose. It doesn't serve anyone well. And if it were to be utilized long-term, then a mitigation would have to be installed in order to be able to do that.
Got it. I'm just looking for something more solid than I anticipate versus I'll commit to the construction of a railroad overpass at these two crossings.
If I may suggest, right, you've been asking for a public meeting. I suggest we call one and we bring the railroad with us as well as the design team. So that way I'm not, deflecting this to a railroad operation because I can't speak for them, but bring them to the meeting as well so that we can openly discuss these things.
And certainly, and I'm sure everybody on the board would have loved to be at the workshop that just happened, but we just heard about it today. or at least I did.
Okay.
I mean, we could have talked about it, but we were excluded from that.
Happy to do another one at your leisure, sir.
And I mean, is this board going to have to expropriate that guy's land over there for y'all? And we don't even get to be in the room?
Which guy, I'm sorry?
The people that own, there's a thin strip of land between parcel 6 and the river that kind of bifurcates parcel 6 a bit. Somebody,
Yeah, the two contested tracks that are on the Batcher, is that what you're referring to, on the Batcher side?
I mean, it seems like there's one that's owned outright. If you go into the the assessor's website, is it Calhoun? Is that the tract?
So, without getting into too much of that complicated detail, what I can tell you is that Calhoun has claim for not only the tract that is in front of that triangular wedge that they own, but also the entire Batcher down past Crapell's land. And then the Woodlands Plantation, owned by Mr. Crapell, has claim to the land, the Batcher lands that are directly in front of his property. So just kind of square that into the river. It's my understanding from the parcel 6 ownership, which they have to clear title, that there is a hearing set for that September the 8th to reconcile that. And I'm not a party to that, Mr. Blink. I just have been notified that that's the time, if you will, of when I think that's going to be heard.
Is that going to be set in Plaquemines Parish?
I believe so, but I'd have to confirm and get back to you. Again, I'm not a party to the litigation, but I'm happy to share it to you.
Sure.
Sure.
Complete your comments, Mr. Blink.
That's it, yield.
Councilman Konovich?
I was gonna bring up the stakeholders meeting. I knew, when was it?
It was on Tuesday afternoon.
And you gave them this presentation y'all just gave us today?
Pretty much, yes, sir.
Because I go back to Sandy can't tell us nothing because of the exclusivity and he don't want to get out. But here we are telling people in the public before you tell us. And I've brought it up before, and I know people with Bobby and all was in there.
Yes, sir, they were.
And they getting information before we get it.
I
And-
hear you, Mr. Koknovich. Yes, sir.
Complete, Mr. Konovich?
Yep.
Ms. Newberry?
Yes, so this board has asked for public meetings. Have y'all had public meetings?
Yes, ma'am, we had one. Mr. Koknovich actually hosted it. We were down in Buras. We've attempted two with Mr. LaFrance. I know that we've had scheduling issues, and we're just waiting to hear back from him. I want to do the next one in Port Sulphur. But if any of the other council members want to call a public meeting, we will make ourselves available. I believe the one that Mr. Koknovich hosted was at 6, is we did in Buras at 6 o'clock at night.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody put it in the Gazette.
So,
I know this project is pretty much further south, but it would be nice to have a public meeting at the Bell Chase Auditorium so the northern part of the people would understand, because a lot of those people do work down the road, have jobs down the road, and it's part of their life too, because a rail does go across northern part of Plaquemine, so that would be great.
if you can help us coordinate that, we will absolutely attend at the convenience of whenever that meeting is called.
Okay, maybe Bo might want to get involved in that. Thank you.
Complete.
I think you need to include
Councilmember, but Councilman Black? No?
Sorry about being it's so rude.
Who's up? Who's up next? You?
When,
Wait, John, you want the floor?
Give him the floor, I'll wait.
I'm sorry, I apologize, sir. I really do.
I think he's saying he wants to
Councilman Black,
clarify,
you're
so-
recognized.
we're at.
Let's go.
Whenever you'd like to have a meeting, Mr. Bartholomew, just.
Hey, let's move on. Councilman Black, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to clarify a couple things that have been brought to my attention. So I have had meetings, and if you'd like to attend, Mr. Blank, I'd be happy to coordinate something, but I have had meetings with NLGC and other rail stakeholders, and what is being told to me, since Woodland Highway is within my district, is that, and this has been discussed ad nauseum with organizations such as PABI and WBIA, Industrial Corridor, multiple times about the rail. We all want the rail relocation. We all want the Peters Road bypass. That goes without a doubt. The information that I was given from NLGC and other stakeholders was basically they are not going to fund a relocation project without extra containers or extra cargo to make it feasible for them or economic for them. I mean, that's pretty much cut and dry, first grade economics.
I would confirm that, yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's why, I'm supportive of the project, and because I do understand that as soon as, it's going to take time for this project to be built,
And during that process of it being built and having commitments from BCOs that are going to bring X amount of containers in on whatever schedule, that will then allow the rail to invest in the relocation of that project, which would take off all rail off of LA 23 from Chevron to Gretna. So we've had multiple discussions with the city officials in Gretna, as well as Jefferson Parish, to be able to relocate that rail as soon as this project gets fully funded. And there's a commitment, that way NLGC and their stakeholders can move forward with the relocation. So that's my understanding of it. I just wanted to clarify that, because we've been having those conversations often. Thank you, sir. And I would concur with everything. I've been told the same thing by NOGC.
Does that complete your comments, Mr. Black? Mr. Pathalem, you want to be recognized? You did. All right, a couple of closing comments here before we move to a couple of other items. Just to clarify, the Tuesday, July 19th closing date on parcel 6, that closing is for the property only or for the investment for the terminal as well?
That would be, that date is for the property only, sir.
And how far behind that would you expect a closing or some financial arrangement on the construction of the terminal afterwards?
So would you be referring to the contract with the EPC?
I'm referring to whatever it takes to finance the construction to get Massman started.
So those are part of the same funds, and that would just be, as Steve was kind of indicating, there's some small points in our contract that have got to be finalized, but those funds would then be set aside in a separate account in order to be able to fully fund that. So all those funds come in the same time. A portion of those funds are used for the closing of the property. A portion of these funds are being utilized for funding the contract that Mr. Hayes will be overseeing.
And who's providing that funding?
That's MHI Capital.
Okay. The next question would be, on the Venture Global discussions, you've been in touch and discussed personally with Venture Global about the rail?
I've had one discussion with Mr. Musser and his team. We've had several attempts to contact them as we progress down into what this process is. The renderings that Mr. Matheny put forward were actually found in a DOTD permit by Venture Global, because they have not responded to us on any engagement beyond the one that we had, I believe it was in March.
All right, does that complete your presentation? Before we get to the public comment, does that complete your presentation?
Yes, sir, it does.
Mr. Chairman, one comment.
Councilman Pathalem?
The question with the Plaquemine Parish property, which was the LSU Ag Center,
Yes, sir.
is that a possibility of being a rental piece?
It is. Yes, sir.
Rather than selling, we can just rent it out, we have a,
Yes, sir. I think that we have kind of the same indication of what would be up around the airbase from the Hero family. There are those that want to sell, and there are those that want to do very long-term leases, as long as it, fits in line with what the program is, which I would assume a long-term lease would benefit the owner. Absolutely.
I believe that we've already had this discussion about the lease, and the most favored nation clause in the Venture Global contract would require them to pay no less than what Venture Global pays per month. Correct? On public acknowledgement of all of that?
My understanding, yes, sir.
All right. Complete?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll come for the audience. Mr. Edwards and then Mr. Valet.
Tyrone Edwards, 112 Thomas Lane in downtown Phoenix. I thought the day meeting was about looking at Mr. Sanders' contract, but yet instead looked like it was a pony and dog show. And the reason why I say this, one of the gentlemen up here talk about project fatigue. Well, I'm having project frustration. When I said he a question being asked a developer about where $8 million going to, and this is coming to me. And I love Mr. Sanders, but today I have a different look on Mr. Sanders as it relates to, because I've been dealing with council since the old council, hearing about Peter Road, but seemed like to me, this is not a Plaquemine Parish Pope. It seemed like Mr. Sanders represent private developers, sent him to set a Pope, to create a private Pope for private developers. Because when I look at the central employees on the ferry deck who can't get a decent raise than other people, and we have all these contractors come here talking about money they're getting. Where's the Pope supposed to provide financial money for the parish? Seem like to me, Mr. Sanders represents private developer and not the Port Authority. And so, again, I don't know if this was a pointing dog show to justify giving a raise, but to me, it's not about project fatigue. It should be about project frustration for this parish to let an individual come in here and bring in private developer and turn what was supposed to be a Pope for the parish to a private developer. I think it's a shame, and each one of you all should check your conscience if you continue to let this go on.
Thank you. Any further comments, Mr. Valet?
Donald Valet. And I'll use the address rather than my home address, my business address, 1420 Walker Road. As Mr. Russell knows quite well, and a few members that have been back at that club, and Dr. Buell yourself, I've been back there 30 years behind Walker Road. We've worked with the parish and the state and most of the developers, again, probably 20 or 25 years, to see that the Walker Road Bridge and the bypass came around and the $350 million proposed cost of the railroad diversion outside of Belle Chase was going to happen. We arranged and got $60 million from the state to put this deal together. All of a sudden, what happened to Pavi? What happened to you all the councilmen with the bridge? Yup, the port came up and opposed the damn bridge and supported the toll bridge to go through there and not what was proposed to do. The bridge in its configuration did not increase any capacity for the citizens of this parish. What Walker Road would have, it possibly would have given an opportunity to develop a railroad going through that way. I saw plans, and I gave Mr. Blank, Mr. Rousseau, copies of railroad maps of everything on this West Bank that shows every location of every railroad. I've sat with the Port of New Orleans, looked at every location of their railroad. The whole idea was to move the railroad out of Belle Chase and Gretna. But no, we're going to go along with these idiotic plans that people don't know anything about. The only people who told you all what was going to happen and what was needed with the rail was the people that came up with the no toll aspect of it. But nobody listened to them. But now we're going to say we're going to go to private development, which is the second issue I'd like to talk about, Mr. Chairman, very quickly. I'll try and be as quick as possible. I was a banker 20-some odd years. I've been in a real estate business. I've owned this river. You all heard me say this numerous times. Why do we need a new joint venture partner to put up money for something you already budgeted? And it was in a plan that we saw a long time ago and about buying properties. Why do we need Chris Fetter to put up his money to be now your joint venture partner? What in the hell are we doing? We're big enough to do this on our own. We hired a team of staff.
Mr. Valle, one moment, please.
Yes, sir, I will.
The scenario that I see happening here is that the port has been expending money for the last 10 years on trying to develop this port. The latest twist is that now it's become a private venture. We have expended a lot of money out of this board through legal fees, consultants, studies, that all of this project is based on, and now it has become a private venture, and we are just getting the courtesy of being informed about it. That was my comments in the beginning of the meeting. But I wanted to just set the record straight because I thought you might have made a few comments that
Very confusing what took place here today.
Well,
I mean, if I was sitting at my house looking at this, I'd try to understand what the hell did you all this do? And what's getting ready to happen to you? Another $6 million on the front end, another $8 million here, and the parish is going to have to buy these people out?
Let me say this. We do not know where the $8 million figure came from. That came from the developer, said that's his money. My concern and my next questions were about the $6 million up to the $8 million that Sustainability Partners is providing to Mr. Fetters to spend without an accountability to us. And in the contract, we are responsible for paying Sustainability Partners back every nickel plus 8%. That's been my beef from day one about the transparency and the lack of transparency about where this money is going, and that's why I asked today about the $500,000 on the 50% of the right-of-way listing. What does it reflect? And as you saw, we got no answers.
Mr.
So I don't want to cut you off, but we have some meeting to move on.
I'm a-
Are you going to wrap up, please?
About 5 minutes, if not.
3 minutes.
I'll take 3. You know, all the years in the banking business, I had 1,600 people working for me. When I had my ship repair company, I had 1,600 people working for me at one time. If I got an answer from that from a staff of mine, I suspend his authority until such time as he could give me a direct accounting of every nickel he spends against the budget. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Now, let me try to wrap this up. Mr. Sanders, do you have anything else to add to your update for today? Your executive director update. Do you have anything to add about American Patriot Holdings today to this board?
Through their developer, they said that American Patriot,
Can't hear you, Mr. Sanders.
their developer has intimated to us that once the land is purchased, they will come back.
Why don't you tell the whole story, Mr. Sanders? Did you receive a letter on June the 7th?
Yes, I did receive a letter from Joe Gahegan, who is the president of APH, stating that they needed to get out of there. They were going to exercise their right in 30 days, letting me know that they were going to discontinue their exclusivity.
Yes.
Right.
And so the point I'm making here is that since 2016, we have been partners with American Patriot Holdings. All of the presentations, all of the publicity was hinged on our partner in the river. And I have many quotes from you here today that I could read about American Patriot Holdings. And the letter says, gentlemen, in accordance with the exclusivity agreement dated September 28, 2016, between American Patriot Holdings, LLC, APH, and Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, APH, hereby gives 30-day notice that it is terminating the exclusivity agreement. Now, with something this important, don't you think it would have been appropriate for you to inform this board?
Mr. Roussel, I agree with that statement. And I got the letter. I was under the impression that we could have the land acquired, which would satisfy what they needed. In retrospect, I did not meet it. And you're correct.
And Mr. Sanders, you have been in contact with APH trying to save this deal a couple of times, and we're told that they had to move on because of a lot of things. And I have a letter that lists a lot of things. And what I'm going to ask you in the future, if you're still here, that you not be so secretive with this board when major decisions such as this are made. I don't know what else to tell you about. I sat in your office Monday morning for the board chairman and vice chairman meeting for an update. And I asked you 3 times, did you have anything to share with me? And you said, no, no, no. I asked you again today, 3 times, did you have anything to share with this board? And you said, no, 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 until we drag it out of you. Now, this is one leg of the stool that is a very important leg that we all of a sudden have turned into a non-event. Now, from the beginning, we never had a rail involved in this project. It was all APH. And that was the concept that we went on for years and years until Andalusian showed up, because they need the rail. So you wonder why we have a confidence problem? I think I explained my position. Anybody else can speak for themselves or not speak for themselves, which is volumes of why they don't speak for themselves. So let's move on if you're completed with your report.
I am complete with my report, but having the rail for the terminal has always been in the cards. Matter of fact, it's derived from the strategic plan. So that's always been part of it. Having American Patriot Holdings was certainly a fantastic plus to our port.
I have a question for him.
Councilman Convich?
Just, I want to know if, I know it was asked probably last meeting, but I want to know if you or anyone associated with the port are out looking for people to run for these offices right here.
That was asked at the last meeting, and my answer is still the same. I am not going out looking for anyone to run for the board.
Anybody associated with the port?
Anyone associated with the port.
Somebody who's working with the port?
Employees? No. My employees don't do that.
Either a 60-year friend's lying or somebody else is lying.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
You complete, Mr. Konovich? Mr. LaFrance?
Yes. Want to know, are you available July the 25th at 6 PM so we can have that railroad meeting at the Port Sulphur YMCA?
Monday, July 25th?
Is it a Monday?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Could I have it published in the Gazette, the Parish Gazette,
Yes, sir, we can do that.
and on the parish website?
Yes, sir, got it.
That concludes your comments, Mr. LaFrance?
Yes.
Any other public comments from any of the stakeholders or investors or hopeful investors in the audience want to make a comment today? If not, yes, well, we're not on your item yet, ma'am. You want to make a comment on the port? Okay, come on.
I'm expecting this to be brief. I looked up this corporation at some point in time, and there's no way to see who owns it. And I just feel like that should be public.
Which corporation? LA 23?
No, the port.
A port? Which entity?
It's been a long time
Well,
since I looked it up.
I don't know what you're referring to, so I can't address it, really.
The port has an entity that is a corporation, and the corporation isn't.
Oh, I do know what you're talking about. I know that's somewhere in the documents that there is a corporation or some name that is named that way. But I can tell you, for instance, LA 23, for instance, I haven't seen the occupational license to do business in the parish either. So that's just
I
a
was
comment that
curious to
I'll
know
throw out there because we chase occupational license holders all the time.
I was just curious to know if there's a place that I could see the list of holders in that corporation.
Secretary of State website under corporations. You go there and you can start entering entities, you can enter names, you can do that, and you can search it. And usually when they don't want to be found, they have an address in Baton Rouge or Lafayette, and it just gives another corporation name. But you can try.
Or attorney at hand.
If you Google LASOS and then go to there'll be a tab at the top left that says Business Services, and then search for business filings, and then type in the entity. It'll give you the information if they're listed in Louisiana.
Any further comments to come before us? If not, we'll move. Now, Mr. Edwards, one more time. This is the last time.
I sincerely hope that part where these people paid money for their work in the assessor's office, those $1 million, I truly hope this council really look at that, because I can't understand how somebody could be paid that amount of money for something that anybody can do. So I hope that this board really look into that, because that really got me upset.
I agree. Anything else? If not, we'll move on, Mr. Secretary.
Item 3A, financial report, budget to actual. There is no report this meeting. Item 4, bids and advertisements. There are none. Item 5, introductions of ordinances and resolutions. We have 2. Both are for Commissioner Roussel. The first one is an ordinance authorizing Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, to purchase land owned by M&S Ventures LLC through Deborah Ann White and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. The second one is a resolution authorizing Menard Sandy Sanders as Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District to enter into a cooperative endeavor agreement with Port Ship Service, Inc. and Bear Associates, Inc. for the Lot B3 relocation project and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. And that is it.
Thank you. Move on next.
Ordinance is on second reading and final passage.
Item A, ordinances and public hearings pursuant to Article 6, Section 6.01E of the Plaquemines Parish Charter. There are none. Item B, a resolution approving and authorizing Benedict Roussel, Port Chairman Maynard J. Sanders, Port Executive Director, and Shambro Riley Williams, Port Director of Finance, to execute a Louisiana compliance questionnaire to Cameter and Company CPAs and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Yes, I'll offer that, and we have changes. You want to read the changes?
On line 15, the following has been added. Whereas upon review of the Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire, there is a need to make changes to the document. Then on line 20, there's a new be it resolved, which states, be it resolved by the Plaquemines Parish Council as the sole governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, that it hereby authorizes Benedict Roussel, Port Chairman, to make the necessary changes to the Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire. And then on line 25, it reads, be it further resolved now, and that's the changes.
Next for a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Russo. This is just a simple housekeeping questionnaire that we have yearly with an external auditor through Camnetta for the chair and the director, I think, of finance to sign off on.
Call question.
Call question.
And the ordinance the resolution is adopted 9-0. Thank you. Move on.
Item 6C, a resolution to employ the in-house legal counsel to the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
I'll offer next for a second.
We have to fill in the blank, and there is a change also.
Okay, put the change in.
Sure. On line 7 and line 14, we're filling in the blank with Melissa Fols-Ubre. And on line 15, the date of August 1st has been changed to August 8th.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Blink. Are there any comments or discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Ub will be here at the next meeting once she is employed. She's out of town right now, and I look forward to bringing her on to work with us. She'll have some challenges, to say the least, starting up, but I'm sure she'll be a quick learner. Any comments? Hearing none, machine's open. And the resolution is adopted 9-0.
Item 6D, an ordinance to amend the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District's 2022 revenue and operating expenditure budget, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
I'll offer next for a second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Thalamy. What this is the appropriation for the salaries and wages of the Port Harbor and Terminal District employees, deckhands, and rescue boats for the ferries, for the increase in pay. Any further comments, discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Russo, this was, this is when we got up to what, 13?
Yes.
You remember exact figure to that?
1342 stands out in my mind.
Yeah.
It's 30,000 a year, but they work on a different different amount of hours per year. We thought it was $15 an hour for a deckhand, and when we left the meeting, that's what we thought. When we got back to the office a couple of days later, they informed us that they work 2,080 hours or whatever it is more than the normal employee of 2008. My numbers might be off a little bit, but that reduced the pay to what it is, $13.42. Something to that effect. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, sheet is open. And the ordinance is adopted 9-0.
And item 6E has been deferred.
Have a motion to approve the minutes of June 23rd, 2022, the regular minute meetings.
I'll offer it.
Offered by Councilmember Blink. Is there a second by Councilmember Newberry? Any comments or discussion on the adoption of the June 23rd, 2022 regular meeting minutes? Hearing none, machine is open. And the minutes are adopted 9-0. Do they have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Kanovich, second by Bartholomew. Machine is open on adjournment. And the meeting is adjourned at 4:49.